Getting ready for Passover, so I'm going to do a two-part series about things which I think are pretty important, pretty central to Pesach, to Passover, but oddly have been passed over by a lot of people. They're not. It's not really that emphasized. And one thing is a little bit, indelicate. We like to think of our holidays as nice, happy, antiseptic. What could be cleaner than the holiday at Passover, right? We have obsessive compulsive disorder, getting our kitchens and our homes ready for Passover.
Even the ceilings.
Even the ceilings, even the sockets, right? Like I said, obsessive compulsive. And then, who wants to gum up the works with something that's bloody and gory and messy, right? But when you stop to think about it, the central event of Passover, right, is really bloody and gory. What was being passed over? What was being passed over were doorposts and lintels that were smeared with blood. And you could say, well, okay, of course, meat preparation. There was a sacrificial offering going on. It was called the Paschal Lamb. We know preparing meat, till we get it nice and saran wrapped in our supermarket, refrigerator cases. We understand that a lot of blood and gore has to be gone through before we get our nice, like I said, shrink-wrapped product. But it's really much more than that. We're not just talking about the sacrifice of a lamb. We're talking about a literal bloodbath. Okay? This was the same night of the Passover offering, the night that preceded the Exodus from Egypt. It ended 210 years of hard labor, 400 years since the exile began with the birth of Isaac, according to our tradition. Okay? Concomitant with that was Makas Bacharos, the plague or the slaying or the striking of the firstborn of Egypt. And it was so pervasive a plague. All the 10 plagues were pretty rough, right? But this was so pervasive a plague, so all-consuming a plague, that first of all the Torah teaches us, Ein bayis asher ein sham nes. There was no household at all in all of Egyptian society, unless it was a Jewish household that had the protection of the blood of the Passover offering, unless it was such a house. Ein bayis asher ein sham nes. There wasn't a single home where there wasn't at least one dead person, which kind of makes us scratch our heads and boggles the imagination. What do you mean? Every single family had a firstborn child? All right? Okay, we'll get to that answer a little bit later in the evening. Answer that question.
They had more than one.
What?
They had more than
right.
one.
Okay, please, let me get to it. Okay. Aleph. Beis, besides the fact that, like I said, it was a very bloody night, in a certain sense a massacre of a night. People were dying in droves. The other plagues, you can say, people were dying in droves too. But it was obviously a bloodiness or death isn't even really the point. This was the straw that broke the camel's back. The Pharaoh of Egypt was a tough guy. He withstood a lot of plagues on his own. It's a discussion for another class, why God stripped him of his free will. But at a certain point in the 10 plagues process, the Pharaoh of Egypt was stripped of his free will, and he had extra oomph, his stubbornness on steroids, I like to call it, But he was able to withstand those plagues, and finally, he succumbed, the society succumbed. This is when they agreed to let the Hebrew slaves go. All right? So it's really central to all the things. We emphasize the themes of liberation. We emphasize, I've given classes here in past years, dining at God's table, examining the consumption of the Passover offering, sacrifice, Paschal Lamb, a lot of different words for it, which is really what our Seder is all about. Our Seder is to replicate as much as is possible in an era when we don't have a temple in Jerusalem anymore, to try to replicate the offering of the Passover sacrifice. But tonight I don't want to emphasize that. Tonight I want to examine what we really mean when we talk about the slaying of the firstborn, what our classic commentaries have to say about it. Okay, and the departure point I want to look at is something that really preceded all the plagues. Before we look at any text, I'd be remiss if I gave a class on any of the plagues of Egypt if I didn't share with you a very fundamental concept, not just for Passover, but really for all of Torah and for all of mitzvahs, that Nachmanides says at the end of Parshas Bo. He's concerned with, why are there so many mitzvahs of the Torah that we describe as being Zecher Liyetzias Mitzrayim, in memory for the exodus from Egypt. The mezuzahs on our doorposts, Zecher Liyetzias Mitzrayim. The tefillin, the phylacteries that we wear on our head, Zecher Liyetzias Mitzrayim. Shabbos observance, remembrance of our exodus from Egypt. The sanctity of a human firstborn child, remembrance of the exodus from Egypt. The sanctity of kosher animals that are firstborns, same thing. Donkeys, did you know this? That there is a certain mitzvah that pertains to a firstborn donkey in the ancient Israel, actually even do it now in contemporary Israel, when Jews are ranchers again. If a Jew owns a donkey, and the donkey mare has a firstborn child, and that's a male, it's called a bachar chamar, or a petach chamar, you've got to redeem it onto a kosher animal. Right?
You do it.
Is it? Pardon me?
No, never mind.
Okay. The mitzvah of sukkahs, of sitting in a sukkah. Right? Keep a sukkah, so shafti es b'nei Yisrael, but tziyos eretz Yisrael. I caused the Jewish people to dwell in booths when I took them out of the land of Egypt. The only thing that prevents me from presenting you with even a longer list is my weak memory. But suffice to say, there are so many mitzvahs of the Torah that all have to do with remembering the exodus from Egypt. And the granddaddy of them all is celebrating the holiday of Passover, obviously. So Nachmanides says as follows. The reason for the centrality of constant reminders, ritualistic reminders, built in to our daily lives, and again, a big festival in the springtime, to make such a big deal about the exodus from Egypt, one historical event. This is much more than one historical event. He says, this is Judaism, this is the religion. Because there were what Nachmanides refers to as so many deos meshubashos, there were so many faulty theologies and ideologies extant in the world. And to a certain extent, they're still with us today. You've got the notion that the earth is spontaneous, as the ancient Greeks used to call it. I don't know the Greek terminology for it in Hebrew, the way it says, ha'olam kadmon. The world is first, there is no creator. The world is here, it's always been here, it's solely to talk about a creator for the world. That was one heresy. There was the notion of, maybe there is a creator, but he has no clue, he's not interested in our affairs here. No awareness. There was a heresy that there's an awareness, but there's no real supervision. He knows what's happening to human beings, but he could care less. It's a world of happenstance. There's no cause, there's no effect, there's no judge, there's no judgment, there's no reward, there's no punishment. Okay? Even if he is involved in the affairs of human beings, that he communicates with human beings, that there could be such a thing as prophecy, as distinct from schizophrenia, I'm talking here. Right? Hearing voices that way. Right? A lot of people denied that. And he says, and the exodus from Egypt belied all of these. When there was Shidud Marachas Hatava, as Nachmanides calls it, when God laid waste to the laws of nature, when the miraculous happened, and not only did the miraculous happen, but the miraculous kept on accumulating and accruing to the benefit of one nation and the detriment of another nation. And all of this was predicted by a prophet. Every time there was a plague, Moshe Rabbeinu and his brother Aaron go into Paro, go into the Pharaoh in Egypt and say, your river's going to turn to blood. Okay, you'll be invaded by wild animals. Hailstorms will come that the earth has never seen before. So this basically puts our philosophy, our theology, our ideology on firm footing, on firm grounding. Yes, there is a God. There has to be a creator of nature, because it's not an automatic pilot. When he wants, he goes into manual and there's override commands. That's what we call a miracle. The miracles are purposeful. They're for the benefit of one nation that he's favoring and to the detriment of another nation that has acted wickedly and immorally. So there's awareness, there's supervision, there's cause, there's effect, there's a judge, there's a judgment, there's a reward, there's punishment, there's prophecy. All this is being predicted through his spokesman. Okay? And all of these are fundamentals of Torah Judaism. If you believe in these, then the revelation at Sinai isn't a myth, it's a historical fact. The relevance, the importance, the binding nature of the Torah regiment, of the mitzvahs, becomes clear. But it's all predicated on realizing and believing and kind of baking it into ourselves that there was an exodus from Egypt and it happened the way it's recounted in the Torah. So that's what we're constantly reminded. We're constantly have these ritualistic and symbolic reminders. Okay? The little, red ribbon on our wrist, so we shouldn't forget something. Constantly being reminded, okay, about the exodus from Egypt. It is the central event in Jewish history. God is not going to perform on demand. I want to see a miracle. Validate your existence. Prove it to me. It doesn't work that way. We have a tradition. It happened. I'm not saying it has never happened since the Exodus. There are exceptions to the rule. There's plenty of miracles recounted in the balance of the Bible. There are plenty of post-biblical miracles. That we have a tradition occurred. According to some people, there's still miracles happening today. There's certainly hidden miracles that are happening to this very day. And that's how Nachmanides concludes his piece. He says the open miracles, the miracles that clearly abrogate and supersede the laws of nature, will sensitize a person to the fact that everything that we call causality, everything that we call nature, is really just hidden miracles. So, okay, that's a general, I hope that alone is worth the price of admission. The basic Torah outlook from Nachmanides. But I'm saying if this is true about the process, the historical process that we call Yetzias Mitzrayim, the exodus from Egypt in general, how much more so, do we have to examine the breakthrough event, if you want to distill it down to one moment in time? It was this, the slaying of the firstborn. That is the exodus from Egypt. That broke the slaveholders' hold on the slaves, and they were transformed at that instant, at that moment, from slaves into free men. So that's why I wanted to dedicate at least one class to it. All right, let's take a look here. I know the chapter and verse, I have to find the page for you. This is page 277. This is pretty much happening right after the Mara Hasna, the revelation at the burning bush. Okay? Moshe has his first overt prophetic experience. He's got his mission from God to be the messenger of God and the spokesman to Pharaoh, and to be the redeemer of Israel. He's the one who's going to take the Hebrew slaves out of Egypt and liberate them. That's his mission. It's a long story, it's a long narrative. He doesn't want the mission. He's given signs first before he can convince Paro. He has to convince his own nation. He has to convince the Jewish people. At any rate, towards the end of this episode, God says as follows. Okay, it's near the top of the page on 277. Look in verse 22, page 227. You must say to Pharaoh, this is what God says. Israel is my son, my firstborn. I have told you to let my son go and serve me. If you refuse to let him leave, I will ultimately kill your own firstborn. Firstborn son. Okay, the Hebrew word is bechar. Makas becharos, the slaying of the bechar. Okay, the Hebrew word for a firstborn son is a bechar. Okay. So first of all, you see, before we even get into the commentaries, just the text itself. This is a fine example of what we sometimes pray in the Friday night liturgy. Sof ma'aseh b'machashava techila. What's last, indeed, is first in thought. The last thing that you end up doing when a person has a grand plan, forget about God. Even we human beings, we have a picture of our dream home, and we have certain features of the home that we want. But very often the features that caused us to dream about the home in the first place are the last one that the contractor, the builder puts up. You gotta frame out the house, and you have to dig a basement and a foundation, and they have to sheetrock it. This is not what you had in mind. You weren't thinking of a skeletal structure. The real picture of the dream house, emerges last. So it's striking that before Moshe Rabbeinu at this point has not even returned geographically to Egypt. He's still on the Sinai Peninsula. He's still going to pick up his wife and children in Midian. And then he's going to return to Egypt. He's not even in Egypt yet. Forget about it. He hasn't even met Paro yet. And the first thing that God is telling him, this is what you have to tell Paro. If you don't send away my firstborn, I'm going to slay your firstborn. Okay, so this was not the first warning. He goes in, he's got the episode with the staff turning into a snake. There are 9 plagues that happened before the slaying of the firstborn. Nevertheless, God is talking, so to speak, about his ultimate plan. The ultimate plan is, this is going to be accomplished, this exodus of the Jews of Egypt is going to be effected. This is the equation, this is the tit for tat. I have a firstborn, it's the nation of Israel. You've been dishing dirt, you've been doing wrong, you've been doing grave injustices to my firstborn. If you don't cut it out, I'm going to slay your firstborn. Okay, that's A. B, the old, I'm sure you've heard it, scores of times from Rabbi Turk, from me, when I've taught, is the concept that God doesn't just reward and punish, but does so poetically. We call that midah keneged midah, measure for measure. Right? Call in Greek or Latin, I forget what the expression is, quid pro quo. Yeah. The Egyptians oppressed the Jews with drowning children. The ultimate comeuppance, the ultimate punishment of the Egyptian army was drowning in the Sea of Reeds, the Red Sea. Right? And so on and so forth. Whether we're talking about a reward or we're talking about a punishment, there's a measure for measure kind of reaction. And this is another fine example of it. But the point is, this is God talking over here. We wouldn't think of it in these terms. If I was the one in charge, so to speak, if I come to power, if you were God, right? If I was God, I would say, you enslaved, my children for 200 years. Yeah, I'm going to enslave you for 200 years. No lack of historical precedence of a later empire superseding an earlier empire, and the later empire enslaving whoever survived from the previous empire. That's what I would think. The sin was slavery, or a very cruel kind of slavery, usually punished with slavery. Sons, it's anthropomorphism. God doesn't have a son, certainly not, God forbid, in a Christian sense. We're not talking about it in those terms. And once we talk about sons, what does a firstborn son mean? God is giving definition. He's giving some kind of a shape, some kind of a form to the real injustice, so to speak, that was done to the Jewish people, and also the crux of what's at stake here. What are the terms? What's this competition, if you will, between Pharaoh and God? What is this about? Okay? The stakes here is Bechorah, is firstness, is primacy, and that's right. To me, that's overt. That's right near the surface of the text. Okay. Before I share with you what the major commentaries say on this verse, and I don't know if we'll have time even this evening to go forward to get to the slaying of the firstborn itself. But let's go a little bit backwards to give this a little context, a little historical precedent. Those of you who have been coming to this class loyally for years, I'm sure you've learned about this already with Rabbi Turk. Take a look back in Genesis. Page 117. Okay. You want to start reading, please, from verse 27 on page 117.
Me?
Yeah, go ahead.
The boys grew up. Esau became a skilled trapper, a man of the field. Jacob was a scholarly man who remained with the tents. Isaac enjoyed eating Esau's game and favored him, but Rebekah favored Jacob. Jacob was once simmering a stew when Esau came home exhausted from the field. Esau said to Jacob, "Give me a swallow of the red stuff, I'm famished." He was therefore given the name Edom. "First sell me your birthright," replied Jacob. "Here I'm about to die," exclaimed Esau. "With what good is a birthright to me?" "Make an oath to me right now," said Jacob. He made the oath and sold his birthright to Jacob. Jacob then gave Esau bread and lentil stew. Esau ate it, drank, got up, and left. He thus rejected the birthright.
Okay. Very famous episode in Genesis, the sale of the birthright. Okay, for those of you who don't remember the whole narrative, these two fellows, Esav, you're pronouncing it Esau, that's a good English transliteration, let's use the Hebrew words. Esav and Yaakov were twin brothers, twins, not just brothers, but twins. Esav was born first, Yaakov was born second, legal, fair and square. Esav is what we call the Bechor, is the firstborn son. Nevertheless, Yaakov has some kind of a stake in the birthright. He wants the birthright, and he effects this sale. Okay? It's the worst sale since the Native Americans sold Manhattan Island, for the equivalent of $22. Esav sells his birthright for a stew of lentils. Okay, it's right there in the Chumash. But pardon me?
It's the hill of beans.
Right, for beans. Yeah. For beans. He sold it for beans. And maybe that's where the expression for beans comes from, for all I know. At any rate, those of you, again, who, like I said, have been loyal students perhaps for years of this class, know that this is just the most striking example of the contention between firstborns and younger brothers throughout the first book of the Bible. You've got Cain and Abel. You've got Yishmael and Yitzchak, the father of these two boys. Okay, wrangled with his brother who was 13 years his senior until he emerged as the dominant brother, even though, chronologically speaking, he was born second. Right? You've got Yosef and his brothers. You've got within Yosef's children. You've got Ephraim and Manasseh, right? Yosef brings Ephraim and Manasseh for the blessings to his father Yaakov when Yaakov was on his deathbed. He's got it arranged that the older boy is next to the dominant right hand of Yaakov, and Yaakov thrusts his right hands that way and places it on the head of Ephraim, who's really the younger brother. Right? So throughout the first book of the Torah, you've got this tension, you've got this contention, you've got this drama going on between the overt biological firstborn and those who get the birthright, even though they are apparently or biologically not the firstborn. Okay? So, the first thing that I want to share with you is what Rashi, the most classic of all commentaries, but I'm going to ask you to stow this for a while. He has two explanations for back to page 277, the text that we're actually examining tonight. Okay, page 277, again, verse 22 reads, "You must say to Pharaoh, this is what God says, Israel is my son, my firstborn. B'ni b'chari Yisrael." I would have translated it as Israel is my firstborn son. So, Rashi has two explanations. What does firstborn mean in this context? He says, well, it means one of two things. He either says it's being used loosely, it's not hard and firm and totally accurate. Firstborn is just a way of saying more important. He brings a precedent. There's a verse in the Psalms where the prophet Nathan is trying to speak about how King David will be preeminent among the kings of the earth. He says, Hine b'char nesaticha, I have placed you, I have made you into a b'char. Within his own family, I think he was the last of 7 sons. He was the youngest. And certainly among kings, among ancient medieval potentates, he was not the first guy of his era, to attain his throne. He had to contend very mightily over his throne too, with Saul, with sons, with other pretenders to the throne. Be that as it may, God promised him, Hine b'char nesaticha. Doesn't mean I'll make you a firstborn. It means I'll make you preeminent. I'll make you first among peers. Right? Had Orwell said, an animal farm, all animals are created equally, but some are more equal than others. Right? There's this concept of being first among peers, which is really, that's the metaphor. That's really what a firstborn child, in a family is. Right? We're all siblings. We're all second generation. I'm not your father. I'm only your oldest brother or oldest sister, as the case may be. And yet, anyone who's been in that family dynamic, anyone who has not been an only child, right, or the parent of an only child, everyone knows that family position is destiny, pretty much, right? And that when you have an oldest brother or sister, there's something about them. Yeah, they're one of the siblings, but even with that, even if you're totally unschooled, in Torah law or in a legal system that accords some kind of extra holiness or sanctity or rights or inheritance rights to the firstborn, just in the whole idea of a family dynamic, the oldest kid in the family is first among peers. That's the best way to describe it. They're not one of the parents, they're one of the kids, but there's something more than just another one of the kids. Okay, and hopefully we'll examine that a little bit more in depth as we go through the evening. So that's the simplest explanation of what it means, B'nai B'char Yisrael. God is the creator, He's the father of all of humanity, of all that is, right? And nevertheless, among my creatures, all creatures are created equal, but some are more equal than others. That's a nice way of framing, what it means to be Jewish, what the Jewish nation means, within the balance of creation. But then he says an amazing thing. He says another explanation of this statement, B'nai B'char Yisrael. Yisrael is my firstborn son. Don't forget that Yisrael is not just the name of a nation, it's also the name of a historical individual. Right? Yaakov Avinu, Jacob's other name was Israel. The nation is called because we're all B'nai Yisrael. We're all children of the person called Israel, Yisrael. Says Rashi, B'nai B'char Yisrael, God is signing off on the trade-off of birthrights for beans. You should know something, that many Jews themselves have misgivings, but certainly historically anti-Semites have always pointed to this passage in the Bible that we just read before, about, Nebuch, the poor Esav, after a tiring and exhausting day of hunting, he's all up against it, and here you have this ruthless, swindler, Jacob, pushing a hard bargain, right? And then later they put that together with the subterfuge that he used to get the brachas. You say, oh boy, the 3 slimmest volumes in anyone's library, right? Polish scientific discoveries, Italian military heroes, and Jewish business ethics, right? Unfortunately, sadly, right? That's what they say. Ethnic humor is politically incorrect, but after our president, said his little line about the Special Olympics a few nights ago, I don't feel so restricted anymore. Okay, at any rate, but that's how it is. Whether you're an anti-Semite, whether you're a slightly insecure, self-hating Jew, Jewish business ethics make you a little bit uneasy, right? And this is one of the, can you imagine, a Baal Musar from Chavetz Chaim behaving this way? A guy's exhausted, a guy's at his wit's end, according to some of our traditions. he wasn't being a drama queen. So when he said, he was literally at death's door. If he didn't get something down his throat, that instant he was just going to expire right there. Yeah? And that's when you drive a hard bargain. Ruthless. Right? Doesn't sound good. Says Rashi, here God signs off on it. It's legitimate. It's 100%. B'ni b'chayri Yisrael. Yisrael is the firstborn. The historical person Yisrael is the firstborn. One of the super commentaries on Rashi, the Maharal Prague, says, according to the second interpretation of Rashi, he's not talking about the nation of Israel. He's talking about the person Jacob/Israel. And he's a Bechar. He was a Bechar to his father, to Isaac. Right? And it says so in my Torah. It's not just his machinations, it's not just his manipulations, it's real. He's a Bechar. We'll come back to Rashi a little bit later. Let me tell you what some of the other great commentaries have to say about this. The Ibn Ezra says, what does it really mean when we say, if we're not talking about the person, Jacob/Israel, we're talking about the Jewish people, what does it mean when we say they were Bechar? God could have said, they're a Nasi, they're princes, Later, they're going to be described, right before the giving of the Torah at Sinai, they're going to be described as a kingdom of priests. There's a lot of other words that we can use to show nobility. So this is no. A Bechar means firstness, primacy. Who came first? When you're dealing in the second generation, who came first? Parenthetically, before I tell you the Ibn Ezra, I want to tell you something that the Chachmei HaLashon, the Jewish Lashon Kodesh, the holy tongue etymologists have pointed out. The structure of the word Bechar in Hebrew, it's 3 letters. It's spelled with 3 letters. A Beis, a Chaf, and a Resh. Okay? Mrs. Bennett, you'll help me on this one. What's the gematria, what's the numerical value of the letter Beis? Beis is how much? 2. Chaf is how much?
20.
20. How much is Resh?
200.
200.
220.
2, 20, 200. Okay? The number 2 is the second of the single numbers. The number 20 is the second of the tens, in increments of 10. And the number 200 is the second in increments of 100. So basically, the very structure of the word Bechar says what a Bechar is. A Bechar is the first of the seconds. The first possible second that you can be, in any permutation of it in the alphabet, that's what a Bechar is, in sequence. From singles to tens to hundreds, that's what a Bechar is. An Av, a father, is the Aleph that causes the base. First 2 letters of the alphabet. The truly first one, the Aleph, that brings about the second one. That's what fatherhood is. That's the structure of the word in Hebrew for a father. Av. An Aleph that brings with it the second thing, the base. The Bechar is, like I said before, the first of the seconds. It's not a fault, like I said before. In a family structure, my oldest brother is not my father, right? But he's something more to me. In this generation, he's the father, so to speak. In this generation, he or she, as the case may be, is the first. Okay. So then Ibn Ezra says like this. What it means when God says that my firstborn son is Israel, a son, certainly when we get to the 10 Commandments, the relationship between a son and a father is one of love and of fear, like the relationship that a religious person is supposed to have with God. There's a mitzvah in the Torah to love and fear God. There's a mitzvah in the 10 Commandments to love and fear your parents. We usually say honor your parents. Okay, but the way the Talmud explicates what that word kabed esavicha that says in the 10 Commandments means, it's something that we would associate with love. Proactive acts of service. Help them on with their clothes. Help feed them. Help make sure that they're shod, and so on and so forth. Later in Parshas Kedoshim, there's a mitzvah that parallels the 10 Commandments. It says, every person should fear or be in awe of their father and mother. From there, we learn out the things that we normally associate with honor in our idiom, in our vernacular in English. For example, Don't sit in their chair. Don't interrupt them if they're having a conversation with another person. Don't insert yourself into that conversation. The kinds of things that we would normally associate with respect/honor really go into awe or fear. And the things that we normally associate with love, that's in the Ten Commandments, kabed. But that's exactly the relationship that a human being is supposed to have with God. So this pasuk says that Ibn Ezra is saying, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, the matriarchs and the patriarchs, they were the first. They were the first people in the human race to serve me. So as children, they are the Bechars. They are the first and the second. They are creatures, they are not creators. But in that second generation, if you will, they're the first. And as such, they will always have a special place in my heart. They and their descendants. That's what it means. B'nai Bechar Yisrael, in what sense is it a Bechar? Like I said, we're not Christian over here. God isn't a Holy Ghost going around biologically siring people or nations. It means in the sense of what the relationship between children and parents should be, or creators and what they have created should be, right? This was the first nation on earth to do that. The Svarnai, taking off from this, sees an eschatological, or an end of days. Not just that God, so to speak, is getting ahead of himself to Moshe Rabbeinu, talking about the ancient redemption, the redemption from Egypt, and talking about the last moment of the redemption of Egypt, the slaying of the firstborn. He's talking about the final redemption too. He's talking about the Messianic era. About the Messianic era, the prophet Amos said, Ki oz epa chalamim safar brura likra kulam b'shem Hashem. Then I will turn up to all the nations a clarity of speech that they will all call out in the name of God. Okay? If that's a little bit too fancy for you, you might remember the liturgy that we say on the high holidays, on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, right? That we say, V'yasu kulam aguda achas. Let the whole world, one world government, one world religion, let the whole world recognize the one true God and serve Him, Shechem Echad, putting together, as it was, metaphorically speaking, one shoulder to serve God. Says the Svarnai, that even in that era, even in the Messianic era, right, when in a certain sense, we're all Jews, you know? I'm just reminded of a Borscht Belt comedy tape, that we sometimes listen to on family trips. I don't know. I think Alan Sherman. I think the tape is maybe 40, close to 50 years old at this point. But they have like this ballad over here. The whole world is Jewish. And they start going through like all the and that lovely couple, Harry and Belafonte, right? And so on. Steve McQueen is Jewish, could you believe it? And so on and so forth. What kind of world would this be if we were all Jewish? I don't know, it's hard to imagine. But in a certain sense, that's what the Messianic era is supposed to be. Nevertheless, this prophecy, these eternal words of the Torah is saying, somehow or another, I don't have a clear grasp on exactly what it means. There will still be a special place, a special position, and a special place, shall we call it, in the affections of God for the Jewish people, because they were first. By then, it'll be all right. Everybody's practicing Torah, Judaism, what we call Judaism today. Let's call it more accurately. Everybody will be studying Torah and performing mitzvahs. All of humanity. It doesn't matter. You guys, so to speak, you were the first. And then he goes on to say an amazing thing. Yes, it's true, as the Nachmanis I started the class with said, that all of the plagues of Egypt, all the other wonders that are ancillary to the plagues of Egypt, and finally the parting of the Red Sea, all of that is important in establishing a true theology and a true philosophy and a true religion. It's all very true. Nevertheless, he says there's a qualitative difference between the first 9 plagues and this plague of the slaying of the firstborn. And the way he says it is that really the first 9 plagues were not punishments at all. Okay? There were negative reinforcement. Maybe psychologists today would say you got to work with positive reinforcement. The idea was an irritant to get the Egyptians, and to get the king of Egypt to do teshuvah, to repent. Okay? We know that God wants teshuvah, not just out of the Jewish people, all nations who can forget every Yom Kippur afternoon, Teshuvah Day, right? And our annual number one Teshuvah Day. The crescendo of the afternoon is Mafta Yonah. Is a prophetic reading that we read about a prophet of Israel being sent to a Gentile city to try to induce them to do Teshuvah. Nineveh, Hir Agdol, the great metropolis of Nineveh, right? There was a wicked city, and he successfully got them to do Teshuvah by admonishing them in the name of God. So God wants teshuvah. God wants repentance. And all of the first 9 plagues were about clean up your act. Go easy on them. Release them. Let them go on the furlough for 3 days to sacrifice, as Moshe Rabbeinu suggested many times, if you remember the narrative. But he said, but finally the hallmark of punishment or reward is when it's tit for tat. When they got 9 tries, so to speak, to do teshuvah, and they failed. I'm not saying that these negative reinforcements didn't hurt. Sometimes it's hard to discern between what's punishment and what's inducement, what's deterrent. But the Sforno identifies it that way. He says, don't forget that these were the first people on earth to serve me, to have a special place in my heart. They will eternally have a special place in the divine heart, even at the end of days. And when I slay your firstborn, Pharaoh, and all of the firstborns in Egypt, that's already punishment. Now, it's too late for tshuva, so to speak. You had your chances to repent. You had your chances to make things better. Now it's time, so to speak, for pure justice, for pure punishment. That's how Sforno learns it. The Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh, another one of the great classic commentators, Rabbi Chaim ben Attar, has a little different slant on it. The point is not an inducement for teshuvah. The point is, it wasn't a cumulative thing. It wasn't that the way I described at the beginning of the class. I'm not sure everyone agrees with him, but this is the Ohr HaChaim's approach. In terms of what could it have affected the exodus from Egypt, it's about liberating the firstborn of humanity. That's what it's about. So Makas Becharos, instead of being a theory, instead of being the 10th plague, could have been the first plague, and it would have had the same effect. The Jews would have been liberated. You want to know why there was no alternative history? You want to know why it didn't happen that way? Says the Sforno, the first 9 plagues. You see, it's a strange thing. God tells Moshe Rabbeinu, before he's even come back to Egypt, he says, when you see Pharaoh, warn him, send out my firstborn if I'm going to slay your firstborn. When did Moshe Rabbeinu say this? Not by the first meeting, not by the 8th meeting. Okay? According to some commentaries, there's an allusion, there's a hint to the slaying of the firstborn when Moshe Rabbeinu was warning Paro about the hail, about the miraculous hail. Even at that point, there's an expression there, the pasuk, Hindi shalechas kol magafais, I'm going to send you all of my plagues at once. So some commentaries learn that that's an allusion to the slaying of the firstborn. But an explicit warning about the slaying of the firstborn didn't happen until right before that plague. What's going on over here? Says the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh, in a certain sense, God had to move to plan B. You know why? Because when Moshe Rabbeinu did have his first meeting, this was Paro's reaction. Same page, bottom of the page. Page 277. You see a new chapter begins, chapter 5. Look at verse 2. Actually, let's start with verse 1. Okay? You want to read it?
What page? I'm sorry.
277.
Right.
277. Chapter 5, verse 1. Right?
Okay, yeah, I see. Okay.
Go ahead.
Pharaoh replied,
No. Start with 1.
Moses and Aaron then went to Paro and said, This is what Yud Hey.
Right, okay. You say Yud Kei Vav Kei. Just say God.
God of the Hebrews declares, "Let my people leave so they can sacrifice to me in the desert." Paro replied, "Who is God that I should obey him and let Israel go? I do not recognize God, nor will I let Israel leave."
Okay. So, says the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh, this reaction of Paro necessitated the first 9 plagues. The first 9 plagues, it's not about the children of Israel anymore. Now it's getting personal, so to speak. Now it's between me and Paro. Who is God that I should listen to him? Now, this is the when Nachmanides talks about the Deos Meshubashos, the faulty theologies that weren't just like antiseptic, dry, atheistic. I have no religion at all. In the ancient world, they expressed themselves in all kinds of polytheistic, idolatrous cults. Okay? When Paro of Egypt says, "Who is God that I should listen to him?" Who is God? I'll show you who I am. I'm the creator. I created nature. I pay attention. I know exactly what's going on here. I've got the wicked that I punish. I've got the righteous that I reward. That's who I am. And that's what the first 9 plagues were about. Okay? In terms of liberating the Jews out of Egypt, Makas Becharos is it. It's not that it's the fire, like I started off the class saying, Sof Maasav Machshava Tchila. The last thing I planned, that's the first thing that I announce. Okay? It's 2 separate things. It could have been straight an Exodus with the slaying of the firstborn. The fact that there were 9 previous plagues was to counteract this scoffing, this heretical, I don't even know, blasphemous outburst by Paro. That's what it was about, says the Ohr HaChaim.
So the 9 plagues, Pharaoh brought it on himself.
Yes.
This sentence.
Well, according to all commentaries, according to the text itself, he brought everything on himself. The question is the exact dynamic, the exact structure. The Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh learns this way. There wasn't that you needed all 10 to affect the Yetzias Mitzrayim on Exodus from Egypt. 1 makkah would have been enough. The slaying of the firstborn would have been enough. The other 9 makkahs are about this idea of God giving his calling card to the world, as it was. This is who I am, never forget it. Right? We could, and so we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone here. We can liberate the Jews, but also let the world know once and for all who I am. Now, in this contrast, in this dichotomy that I'm making, is it God's agenda, is it Jewish people's agenda? The Rabbeinu Bechaya waxes a little bit mystical, and he says an amazing thing. Does anybody remember off the top of their head, maybe they've heard it, and maybe they can figure it out themselves, what is the symbolism of the burning bush? There was a thistle bush, there was a bush full of thorns, and the divine indwelling, what we call the Shechina HaKadosh, or the holy presence of God, kind of settles itself in this bramble bush, in this thistle bush, and a voice of God, first it's an angel, then it seems to be the voice of God itself, emanates and communicates to Moshe Rabbeinu. Why, of all the plants, didn't have to be in a plant, didn't have to be in an animal altogether. Later on this same mountain, this is the Mount Sinai. I don't know if you're aware of this. The episode with the burning bush occurs on Mount Sinai. All right? When Moshe Rabbeinu asked for a sign of the authenticity of his mission, of the worthiness of the Jewish people to be redeemed, God says, when you take this nation out of Egypt, they will serve me, they will worship me on this mountain. So he's talking to them from Mount Sinai. Later, when God appears on Mount Sinai, he speaks from the clouds and the thunder. There's no bushes. What's the symbolism? What's the significance of God speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu from this bush? I'm not so much interested in the burning. I'm more interested in the bush.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'll take a guess.
Okay.
So much like the rose, the beauty of the flower of the rose,
right,
but it has thorns also. And so too, it would be like the beauty of Torah,
right,
but you are going to, It's going to be.
There's no roses. This is a purely thorn bush.
Oh, really?
It's all thorns. No roses here. It's all thorns.
And it wasn't consumed, that was important.
Right?
What the significance is, I don't know.
Okay. But I'm more interested in the prickly thorniness of the bush.
Nothing can exist there in the thorny bush. Nothing can exist, only Hashem.
Okay. Well, let me ask you a question. If human beings wanted to make a man-made thorn, what would it look like?
Copying the thorn, but we see
What?
Copying the thorn, but we see over there.
I'm not talking about a sculpture. I'm saying if somebody functionally wanted to make a machine, okay, that served the same purpose as a thorn, what would somebody design?
A stick with
Pin
a
cushion
point.
with pins.
What?
A needle.
A needle?
No, something pointed and sharp.
I'm a little surprised.
That would be
Mrs. Bennett, a lager yidden, darf das zu wissen.
Put pins cushion, that's
What?
It's concertina.
Oh, that's what I want.
What is
Barbed wire.
Barbed
Barbed wire, razor wire. It cuts, it lacerates anything that would dare touch it. Okay? And in our recent, last century Jewish experience, what do we associate with barbed wire?
Holocaust?
Concentration camps. Okay? If you want a symbol, three great symbols of suffering, the Gela Lata, the Yuda, the yellow pointed star, the striped pajamas, and barbed wire. Those are the symbols of the camps. And they incarcerate, right? And they're emblematic of the pain and the suffering of what the whole experience was about. And if anyone tried to escape, some of the fences were electrified. Many of them weren't. They didn't need to be electrified. Okay, you were gone, or you could die from blood loss just trying to climb over the barbed wire. Right? Our sages teach us that God revealed Himself to Moshe Rabbeinu pre-Exodus in a thistle bush to say, "Imay anaychem b'tzara." Okay, I'm not sitting up in an ivory tower. I'm not like the Jews who were safe in America while European Jewry was suffering. I'm right there with them. I'm in the camps with you. I'm in the slavery experience with you. If a Jew is suffering, kaviyach, we don't know what this means. How does a perfect God without a body, an abstract thing, a spiritual? We tend to think of it in terms of a total spiritual being. Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg, the Rosh Yeshiva of Baltimore Yeshiva, Zechron Levracha, he used to give a class on Maimonides' 13 Principles, and they made it into a book. I remember reading this passage. To me, it was an epiphany. I still don't know exactly what it means, but he said it's a misnomer. We always talk about spirituality and about God being spiritual. He says God is not spiritual either. He's not physical. He's not spiritual. He is nothing that we have a word for. If we have a word for it, that's not what He is. If we can wrap our minds around it in any way, then He's not that either. Okay? So again, it's hard for us to grasp, it's hard for us to know exactly what this means, but there's such a concept, okay? It was a sense of, I don't mean to be flip, but in our recent American political discourse, it's like President Clinton used to say, "I feel your pain." Okay? I don't know how sincere Clinton was when he was saying it. God was saying to Moshe Rabbeinu, "I feel their pain. If they're suffering, I'm suffering." Okay? There's something we say in the Shabbos Zemiros. We always say, the prophet says, "Ki meitzeischem eretz Mitzrayim around on the flies." Like the days when you came out of Egypt, I will show you wonders. And we say that the patterns for the ultimate redemption of the Jewish people, of humanity, that's going to take place in the Messianic era, the forerunner of that was the exodus from Egypt. Whatever happened in the first redemption, that's what's going to happen writ large, on a larger, more universal, more miraculous scale, but that's what's going to happen in the final redemption. And there's a line that we say about the kibbutz golius, about the ingathering of the exiles of the Jewish people in our Shabbos the Gezmiris. It says, "Yoshuv lo nema ki im v'shav v'kibbutz." It says, it doesn't say in the prophecy about how God's going to gather in the exiles that He will return them to Zion. It says He will return and gather them in. Almost like God is going to take each individual dispersed Jew from the four corners of the earth and lead them by the hand back to Israel. You're coming back with me. That's not I'm chartering a plane for you to come back, and I'm here already. I'm coming back with you. Because this is a dominant theme. It goes back already, like I said, to the sages of the Medrash and the Talmud, but it's especially dominant in Kabbalistic readings. And the Rabbeinu Bechaya was a Kabbalist. And he says as follows. He says that this dichotomy, I mean, he's not talking directly to the Orach Chaim, I'm kind of putting it together this way. This dichotomy that we make between the interests of the Jewish people and the interests of God, there's no dichotomy over there. If you're an anti-Semite, you hate God. If you're an atheist, you hate the Jewish people. Right? Amalek, the anti-Semite, par excellence, we say, Ki mulchama Hashem ba'Amalek midavada. There's a war that God has against the Amalekites from generation to generation. Says the Rabbeinu Bechaya that Makas Becharos, which destroys the Bechorim of the nation of Egypt, and that's the last link in a long metaphysical chain that destroys anything primal or unified about the primacy that exists in the forces of darkness and the forces of evil, as exemplified by the Egyptians. That catapults the primacy, that solidifies, that gives life to the Bechorah of the Jewish people and to God. So Rabbeinu Bechaya, I couldn't say something like this. Okay, but I'm just quoting Rabbeinu Bechaya. Kadesh li kol Bechar, sanctify for me every Bechar. Okay? He reads it, Kadesh li, I became sanctified with the Bechar. The same Bechars that became sanctified the night of the exodus from Egypt, God is saying, I became sanctified too. Because again, there's this relationship between an Av and a Bechar. If you're showing primacy, if you're showing a sequence of things that came first, even if on the historical stage in a certain sense, they come last, the two things happened at the same time. The coming out party, if you will, of God. And that's one of the ways that the Torah describes the slaying of the firstborn. At midnight, when the night halves, when the night is bisected into two halves, I will come out in the land of Egypt. Okay? That revelation, the revelation of God, and the revelation of the truth of the primacy, it's counterintuitive. What do you mean the primacy of the Jewish people? On a national level, they're the last nation to appear in the ancient world stage. The Egyptians were before them, and the Moabites were ahead of them, and the Ishmaelites were before them, and Edom was a big nation already. And these are a bunch of slave vassals. They don't have a separate identity. They're subsumed in Egyptian civilization. No, they become revealed as B'ni B'chari Yisrael. They're my firstborn son. So Kaviyachal, says the Rabbeinu Bechaya, that's a coming out party, that's a B'chara, that's a firstness, that's a primacy, that's a unity for God as well. The Hamek Dover, a 19th century commentary to Netziv of Volozhin, says a very beautiful thing. And again, it's different permutations in a certain sense, as different as all these commentaries are. They're all saying the same thing in a certain sense. What's the difference between a son and a prince? Is there a difference between a son and a prince?
Who their father is.
Okay, exactly. What's a prince?
The king's son.
Okay. And what's a crown prince?
The first son of the king.
What is a crown prince?
It's going to be king.
Okay, the first in the line of succession. Generally speaking, unless there's been a death in the family, it's the Bechar. Okay? So when in verse 22, when God threatens, he says, Hin the hareg is bincha b'charecha. I will ultimately kill your own firstborn son. An alternative translation could be, I will kill the crown prince. Okay? Now, right, the first of the line of succession, the son of the king, aka the prince, who is first in the line to the throne of succession, that's what we call the crown prince. Okay? Now, what about the Prince of Wales? What's the Prince of Wales? Anybody know?
Isn't he a prince in waiting?
What?
Person who becomes the King of England.
That's right. Okay, in France it's called the Dauphin. In England it's called the Prince of Wales. The Crown Prince to the British throne is known as the Prince of Wales. And I forgot which Prince of Wales said it. He says the Prince of Wales is not a position, it's a predicament. Okay. But I forgot which one. There have been many. I mean, the current one, Charles, is not exactly bring great honor to the position. You know, be that as it may, the Hamek Dover understands this thread as follows. What do we mean when we say that the Jewish people are a Bechar? Again, we're not Christians. We're not talking about Holy Ghost siring people. We have to find some kind of symbolic, some kind of relationship definition of the term. Okay? What do we mean when we say that the Jewish people are a Bechar? Well, if God were a commoner, then they'd just be the firstborn of a common man. But God is not a commoner. God is a king. Right? Unfortunately, though, there's no success. I should say, unfortunately. Fortunately, right, being the crown prince, being the Prince of Wales in the kingdom of heaven, in God's kingdom, is not a predicament. It's an honor because there's no succession. There's not a king that's going to die that we have to worry about who's taken over when he dies. Okay? So what then is the position of crown prince? Well, let's put it this way. If I'm a king, and I'm running not only a kingdom, but a family, and with my noblesse oblige, I understand, okay, that it's hard for me to separate those two. Okay? In a monarchy, the family is the kingdom, or is the government, I should say. All right? So in my family dynamic, I have a bunch of princes, who are my sons, and then I have my crown prince. Okay? Do I raise any of these boys differently?
No. Well,
absolutely. Okay? The son who I am grooming to be king, okay, is going to be, even while I'm alive, okay, he's going to get a special training. He's going to be almost a viceroy. He's going to be second to the king. He's going to be an assistant. And the fact of the matter is that of the royals, I mean, we don't have too many models for monarchy and royalty today, but of the royals in England, those men addressed Buckingham Palace. So after the Queen herself, after Queen Elizabeth, the second most prominent royal, the one who you hear making policy pronouncements all the time, is Prince Charles, the Prince of Wales. A crown prince assists the king in the running of the government, even while nowadays I know princes, they run to Monaco, they gamble. They're playboys and playgirls. Again, royalty has been vastly debased, in worlds of parliamentary democracies. But in the good old days, I call them the good old days, of autocratic monarchies, so a responsible king, a benevolent king, makes sure to train the crown prince. Crown prince is his man Friday, is his right-hand man. You got to train the crown prince. The best way to train him is on-the-job training. This is how you govern. Says the Hamek Dovid. If you want to know in the vast eternal plan, you want to know the unique position of the Jewish people in the family of mankind, or in a larger sense in the universe, okay? The protocols of the learned elders of Zion is not a total fabrication. It's not just an anti-Semitic myth. We do run the world. Maybe we don't run the world overtly. Maybe we don't run the world through Hollywood or through the banking industry. Okay? But through our learning of Torah, through our performance of mitzvahs, things change in the world. Is this normal causality? Is this normal cause and effect? Absolutely not. So you build a good economy, the economy is good. Not how much Torah you study, how many mitzvahs you perform. But that's not what we read every day in Kriya Shema. We say, you observe the mitzvahs, I'll give you the rain in a timely manner, the harvest will be good. What? Well, where's the connection? The pasuk should say, if you plow the fields properly, and if you irrigate them properly, then you'll have, forget about the rain, then you'll have a good crop. It doesn't say that. It says if you observe my mitzvahs, then you'll have a good crop. And it's not just limited to Jewish destiny or to the land of Israel. Chaim Volozhiner very famously points out the metaphysical power of the humblest Jew is greater than that of the most powerful non-Jewish politician. And what's making world events rise and fall, this is really what's going on behind the scenes. So that's what it means, B'nai B'char Yisrael. There's not a commoner talking, there's a king speaking. God is the Melech Malchei HaMelachim. So when he says, B'nai B'char Yisrael, my firstborn son is Israel, What he's saying is, they're the crown prince. You're not just treating shabbily a member of my family. You're messing up my government because you're incarcerating the crown prince. How can I run the government, right? When the speaker, think of it in terms of a democracy. The president is saying, I'm supposed to run my government when the Speaker of the House or the Senate Majority Leader are prisoners of war somewhere? Or you go and kidnap the Supreme Court? How's the government supposed to run this way? It's negay in the malchus. You're attacking my malchus. And again, this dichotomy that I said before. Well, one thing is liberating the Jewish people. The other thing is, you said, who is God that I should listen to him? Again, it's of a piece. Paro is abusing the crown prince, so he'll abuse the king too. And the liberation of the crown prince is the liberation of the king. It's no longer a government in exile, if you will. The government is back in its seat of power. It's back in the capital. And that's the mida keneged mida. That's the tit for tat. This is a personal tragedy. Yul Brenner cradles his dead son's, bald head, and then right? What a poignant, personal scene. The government, the succession is messed up when the crown prince dies. This is, you attacked my malchus, my kingdom. I'm attacking you, the king, and your kingdom, and the kingdom that you represent.
I'll show you who is the real king.
Exactly.
I'm showing you who is the real king. You are the king. I'll show you.
Yeah, it's that, and it's more than that. You're